So what do I mean by don't know mind or opening the door to not knowing? Really, it's opening the door to that dimension of our being and our seeing and our awareing that that isn't depending or dependent on. Okay, I'm going to put you guys on that gallery view. I don't like just seeing my big face on the screen. So anyway, you've all come alive for me right now. So it's the place where we're not just immediately going to labels and descriptions and narrative and judgments, liking, disliking. It's a direct experience of anything. And the direct experience could be of a feeling, or it could be of a flower or a tree or a bird or your morning cup of coffee or whatever. It's just a seeing that doesn't have the filters that we usually see through, veils and veils of our conditioned mind. Now, those thoughts and feelings and words and definitions and all of that will no doubt appear. It's almost automatic. That's how we've all been conditioned from the time we were little, to name something. And that's fine, but there's a way of seeing that is before the name. And even if the name comes, it's still possible to develop this capacity more and more in our lives of seeing from really what I would call, and others have called, don't know mind. And this don't know mind is not a mind that's stupid or that doesn't have intellectual knowledge. Both intellectual knowledge and direct experiencing are important, but it's really also important to know the difference. And so often we don't know the difference. We think that our intellectual knowing is really reality, and it isn't. It's a step back from what's actually here, what's actually present. So it's been called different things: direct experience, don't know mind. Suzuki Roshi called it beginner's mind, clear mind, open space of awareness. Lots of different labels, but it's really the mind that's not attached to concepts. It doesn't mean concepts aren't available to you, but there's just not an attachment to them. And in fact, at least in Buddhist terminology, the word nirvana, you've heard nirvana and samsara. Nirvana actually just means freedom from notions, freedom from views. And so this is why in one dimension of experiencing life, we can actually see and feel and experience nirvana is samsara. Samsara is nirvana because we're seeing without notions. It doesn't mean that concepts aren't here. It's just that we're not attached to them. So Zen Master Dogen said, don't try to become a future Buddha. Simply, when thoughts appear, don't attach to them. It doesn't mean thoughts won't appear. It's just we're not here only to live in our minds. And so many of us do, just 24/7 almost. Well, sometimes we're sleeping without dreaming, so no. But anyway, it's just, it's in terms of activity, it's just being at one with activity. It's not about, we have to be sitting on our cushion, don't know. It's also, if we're engaged in some activity, can we be completely there? Because that's what direct experience is. It's always in the here and now. It's not about yesterday or tomorrow. And it's also just a pure seeing, a pure knowing, but not intellectual. It's the knowing of this that's awake in each one of us. And it's our birthright. We had it from actually before we were born. And we have it, all of us have it today. This that's simply clearly awareing, we might say, awake to the moment that we're experiencing. And even if you think, okay, I've been meditating or whatever, and I'm just lost in my thoughts and so forth and so on, what knows that? See, there's a knowing of experience that's coming directly. from this mystery of our being, we might say. So we're just stepping beyond the intellect to experience a moment nakedly. And one of the things we did on Sunday was we had a little exercise where we were looking at some object in the room, with as much as possible putting aside or letting go into the background the concepts we have, the judgments we have, and opinions we have, and so forth. And so I want to just invite us to do a really simple little exercise on that same theme with our hand. We did a lot of little hand movements, some of us, on Sunday, if you recall. But I just want to invite you to just take a few minutes. We'll just do this for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Just gaze innocently at your hand. Now you know the word, and you may have some associations, but as much as possible, just look innocently, almost like a child might, at your own hand. The color, the shape, the hills and valleys, so to speak, between the tendons, the way it could move. If you've ever seen a baby discover their hand for the first time, it's an amazing thing. They don't yet know it's part of their own body, and they're completely fascinated with it. So see if you can just have that beginner's mind looking at your own hand. It's quite a remarkable instrument, actually. And one side, the palm side, might be quite smooth, and the other side, depending on your age, might be wrinkled with brown spots. The colors will be different, just in our skin alone. You simply see this without talking about it in your mind. Okay, now just bring your two hands together, like so. We think that these are two hands, but it's a single body, isn't it? And that's the same as we are in the wholeness of being, in life itself. Apparently two or many, and yet a single body. And now just bring your hands just a little ways apart and see if you can feel energy that is being exchanged, we might say. Maybe not everyone will be able to do this, but if you can, just begin to feel that sense of energetic tingling, or however you might describe it, between the two hands. And then just gradually move your hands further apart. And you can still feel the energy emanating. We can call this qi if we're engaged in any kind of Chinese medicine. And then just keep moving them apart slowly and see how far you can go and still feel energy being transmitted, being felt, sensed. I'm using the word energy, but what if we said, don't know? And yet we can feel it, we can sense it. And you can play with it a little bit. I took taiko drumming lessons a long time ago, and the sensei would have us play with chi, a ball of chi, before the drumming lessons. And so you can just play with this sense of energy that you can perhaps feel. Maybe not all of you can feel, which is fine, but for those of you who can, you just see how wide it can get. And then for those of you who actually are experiencing this exchange or transmission, is it the left hand that's transmitting and the right hand receiving, or the right hand transmitting and the left hand receiving? Can you tell? Can you tell a difference? Or is it just happening almost as one, without a left and right, without an idea of who's doing what? It's just this experiencing. And like our own lives, we're always transmitting where we're coming from, whether we want to be or not. We're always transmitting. And it's just happening. There's no one doing it. Okay. Well, that's just a simple little warm up for our day. But the point I'm making, I hopefully making, is that this that we think of as 2 or 10,000 are really part of a single body. They're expressions. They're individual and unique expressions. But when we really come to discover or to inquire so deeply, who or what am I? We will eventually come to don't know. And then what happens? Often we leave. We think, well, nothing has appeared. But can we just stay present to the unknown? Can we stay open to the unknown? People are often frightened by the word emptiness, which is used a lot in certain spiritual traditions and whatnot, but it's really just another word for openness in a way. And so, just even right now, if you can just put your attention on openness itself, the openness of your seeing, or the openness in the room, and just see if openness itself, not a somebody who's open, but just openness itself, does it have a location? It seems to be everywhere, doesn't it? There's room for everything in openness. Feelings, thoughts, no feelings, no thoughts, sound, silence. It's just available here, open. Empty in itself and yet open to whatever is showing itself, arising. Does anything disturb openness? Is it in opposition to anything? Does it judge anything? That's simply open, the open space of your looking, the open space of your awareing, the open space of the room, the open space of the skies, the heavens. Does it judge anything? There's open space in your body, the nostrils, the mouth, your ears, your eyes. Open, open, open for awareing sight, sound, taste, touch, listening, open for listening. And there's apparently, on a cellular level, a lot of open space in our cells. There's a lot of emptiness, even though so much is happening chemically and electrically and so forth. So I just want to give you an experience, hopefully, of openness when we begin to think about open mind, because don't know mind is open mind. As Suzuki Roshi said, an empty mind is available for anything. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's, very few. So we want to encourage ourselves today, at least, and hopefully in the future as well, to see what it's like, to really experiment, to let yourself experience more and more from this open space that doesn't judge, that isn't confined to a limited idea of who you are or what this might be. And the open heart is part of it. And I don't know mind, we might say, is a mind that is resting or at one with the open heart. They're not two. Open mind provides wisdom, open heart provides love, compassion. And when they're aligned together, we really have a much richer and more awakened perspective of the world, of anything. It doesn't have to be something that's beautiful or profound in our mind's idea. It could be the most simple, ordinary moment, really. Taking a sip of water. The word water doesn't quench your thirst, does it? The word food doesn't nurture you. And so all the ideas that we have about what things are or who people are or who we are, they are often just so limiting, really. We don't really know. So I want to invite us to this openness of heart-mind in a meditation that I will guide for a while, and then we'll sit together just in silence. And so just close your eyes and let your attention drop from the mind of thought to the heart space. And I don't mean just the heart beating in your chest, I mean the heart that we share. Ramana Maharshi called the heart the self. He equated heart with self. And I want to read a poem in this space of openness from John of the Cross. And it's a description of the mystic's experience of don't know, opening the door to don't know. And it's called I Came into the Unknown. John of the Cross was Spanish, so this is a translation. I came into the unknown and stayed there, unknowing, rising beyond all science. Now, this is translated from the Spanish, and that word actually means systematized knowledge, but that's the translation that's generally used, science, but it's this kind of intellectual systemized knowledge. So I came into the unknown and stayed there unknowing, rising beyond all science. I did not know the door, but when I found the way, unknowing where I was, I learned enormous things. But what I felt, I cannot say, for I remained unknowing, rising beyond all science. It was the perfect realm of holiness and peace. In the deepest solitude, I found the narrow way, a secret giving such release that I was stunned and stammering, rising beyond all science. I was so far inside, so dazed and far away, my senses were released from feelings of my own. My mind had found a sure way, a knowledge of unknowing, rising beyond all science. And he who does arrive collapses as in sleep. For all he knew before now seems a lowly thing. And so his knowledge grows so deep that he remains unknowing, rising beyond all science. The higher he ascends, the darker is the wood. It is the shadowy cloud that clarified the night. And so the one who understood remains always unknowing, rising beyond all science. This knowledge by unknowing is such a soaring force that scholars argue long but never leave the ground. Their knowledge always fails the source to understand unknowing, rising beyond all science. This knowledge is supreme, crossing a blazing height. Though formal reason tries, it crumbles in the dark. But one who would control the night by knowledge of unknowing will rise beyond all science. And if you wish to hear, the highest science leads to an ecstatic feeling of the most holy being. And from that mercy comes this deed to let us stay unknowing, rising beyond all science. And so I want to invite you into this realm of unknowing, into this realm of the deep heart. And to enter through that door of unknowing, we really have to leave our knowing behind, temporarily at least. And so it is as if there is a door that you are about to enter, or perhaps you have. But before you can enter, just you need to leave your memories behind, your thoughts of past and future behind, your identification, whatever that may be, with a name or a form or a birth date. You leave behind your beliefs, your ideas, your conditioned views, your opinions. Just leave them at the door. They'll still be here waiting for you. Because to enter this space of the heart, we need a don't know mind. Don't really know. And sometimes people become fearful at this space, and that's fine. There's room in this heart for fear. And before we just sit silently, I will invite you, as Ramana Maharshi invited himself, enter with love the temple that is your own heart. Silently allowing the deep within to flow on and into the deep beyond. Enter with love the temple that is your own heart. Silently allowing the deep within to flow on and into the deep beyond. So we'll spend a little time here together in the silence of the heart, the quiet openness of this mystery, the empty space from which arises love, compassion, wisdom. And in about 10 minutes, I'll invite the bell. So as we sit maybe for a few more moments, you might engage yourself with the questions, what is this? Or what am I? Don't know. What is this? Don't know. But here it is. What am I? Don't know. But here I am. So let's just stop for a few moments, and if any of you care to share as best you can what your experience might have been, either with our little hand exercise or with this longer meditation, it'd be great to hear from you.
James, go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to share.
Hi.
Hi.
I thought the hand exercise was surprisingly profound. I don't know that I've ever really looked at my hand like that. I was just amused by all the lines and watching the bones of my hand kind of expand and contract as I open and close it. And I just had this sense of like, I have no idea what the hell this thing is. It's sort of bizarre. It seems like the concept of hand, and any concept really, almost like shuts my brain off to what's like actually here.
Yes.
What is
Yeah.
that?
Well, there's the brain works the way it works, but there's something aware of that activity too. And no one yet has been able to find awareness inside a brain. So yeah, I mean, when my middle grandson was young, he used to just love to touch my skin, and I have these very prominent veins in my hand, and he would say, "Oh, Grandma, those look just like rivers," and he was just seeing an entire world, in my arm, in my hand, and your experience is like that. It's like looking fresh, right? Looking like you hadn't looked before at something that you use every day, that you see every day, that you probably last year have washed many more times than usual, in the pandemic. And here it is. It's this miraculous phenomenon. Anything else, James?
No, that's it. Thank you.
That was it. Okay.
Sila, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'll try. Dorothy, when you're speaking from wherever it is that you're speaking from, I guess your words, here's how I might describe it. It's not exactly, but I think your words maybe supplant the words that might otherwise be taking up all the attention in my mind. And then, but your words maybe feel like they have a lightness to them or something. And so even though there is sound and words now in my brain, I kind of open up to that space. So I guess one thing I was noticing was that it was harder for me to contact the don't know mind in silence than it was when I was just listening to you, or when, yeah. So that was one thing that was interesting. And then so when you were speaking, there were moments where I knew exactly, well, it gets tricky, but I saw the don't know mind, right? Like
Yes.
I experienced it.
Yeah.
And it was very, it was very ordinary in some ways, and very, well, I suppose grandmotherly in a way, like very, yeah, and in the silent meditation with the poem from John of the Cross, and then your invitation to sort of leave our name, our age, our past, our future at the door for a moment. I think there was I noticed this motion in my being to, I don't know, start to drop those things. But then something came right back up. So in the silence, there was now thoughts of, oh, let go of your name. And did you let go? And like, there were all these thoughts. The felt experience of it was different when you were guiding it, and it took me somewhere. But then, and this is where it was really, really subtle, and I don't know how to talk about it, but then something I noticed was, I don't know how to say this. There is still that open space, and it doesn't even answer I don't know. Like even the I don't know.
It's too much.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like an entirely different thing. The asking, what am I? I don't know. What is this? I don't know. That's almost as skillful as the mind can get, as skillful and close to it as the mind can get.
Exactly. And something saw that clearly.
Mhm.
That's the mystery of you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're always going to be challenged trying to use words, but you really described several things quite eloquently, I thought. The first thing that came to me as you were speaking was just how, and this is true for any of us, not just here today, but, with other teachers or other moments or poets or art or whatever, there's something that resonates with truth that comes through. And it could be resonates with music or poetry or dance or anything where we feel that, just like you did, and there's a sense of in some place, in some recess, in some dimension of ourselves, I know that, do you know? But it
Mhm.
isn't an intellectual knowing. So that's the phenomenon called resonance with the truth. And that's why when you read something or you hear a poem that inspires you or a piece of art, uh, it goes there. And it'll be a different thing for each of us. Do you know? I mean, I can look at a Georgia O'Keeffe painting, for instance, and just feel the infinite right through that piece of art. Now, other people could look at those same, and have a very different experience. So it's individual, but there is something that resonates with truth. And then the second piece that you were mentioning was how it was easier for you to perhaps taste a dimension of yourself through listening.
Mhm.
And listening is an incredible openness. We can't really shut off our listening, not even in our sleep. It will go quieter. But if there's a loud noise, or someone yells fire, the listening is still open. Awareing is still happening, even if we're sleeping. So listening meditations can do that. And that may be something that's available, or a strength, we might say, because we're not all going to come to this in the same way. I mean, if everyone came to this space that's already awake through sitting on a cushion, well, then the whole, everyone who's ever meditated will have had that experience, but we know that's not so. So I think, from my perspective anyway, it's really wonderful to open our ideas about what meditation is. Sometimes it's just listening, openly, just listening, And then the third thing that you were speaking of is it feels so correct in my understanding as well, that the mind can only take us so far. And to say, what is this? I don't know, is as far as the mind could go. But on Sunday, we had a discussion of, we were doing that with an inhale and exhale, what am I? I don't know. And then I asked, did any of you have the experience of the question's just falling away? Because that's where it takes us. Self-inquiry isn't for an intellectual answer. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And then something comes into your mind. It erases the questioner, at least momentarily, right? So, yeah, so thank you for those observations. They seem important for all of us. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to try to share? I know language is not easy in these kinds of discussions.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. One thing I want to say is it's very kind of revolutionary and very helpful that to hear you say that maybe just listening is my doorway, because I think It was very much this feeling that I need to do it by myself and, in silence. So that's one thing that's really opened up for me from your answer. And the other thing I wanted to share, just to be very, I guess, honest and forthcoming, is like when I speak of having noticed that the mind can only take me so far, it happened within the context of the mind still being there.
Mhm.
So, like, the question didn't actually fall away, but what was remarkable was there was something that wasn't the mind
Yes,
that was already there, even as the mind was struggling.
exactly. Exactly. And when we know that that's already here, that openness, that presence, that mystery, really, the mystery of you, the mystery of all of us. When we have a sense, as you're speaking about it, that that's already here, it isn't at war with the mind. It just sees the mind for what it is, and it sees its limitations. The mind can only take us so far. And that's what inquiry into anything, like, what is this? Who am I? What is love? What is truth? All of those kinds of questions that might seem to begin as an intellectual question, or as uh, they can only take us to the door, so to speak, you know? And that's as close as the intellectual mind can get. But then there's something that notices it all, you know? And it knows if you have a busy mind, it knows if you have a quiet mind. It knows if you have a moment of fear and anxiety, or if you have a moment of peace. And there's something already present, before we think there's a me who has to become present. Because this that's present already knows if the me is aligned with it or not, right? We all know when things seem to be really, aligned, and when something is off doing its thing. But to know, as you're speaking about it, that something was beyond that, that's what we're pointing to here. So
Yeah.
great job.
Thank you.
And yet there's no one who's doing it. So even to say great job is a little bit of a misnomer, but once again, I will emphasize that these understandings, these insights, these experiences, regardless of what they are, they just happen. They just happen. Whether it's being enamored with your hand, or realizing something called mind, the mind of thought, can only go so far. I mean, it's this that's already open and present in each one of us. So thank you. So
Thank you very much, Dorothy.
yeah. Anybody else? Len.
Hi. Uh, I, s- um, I noticed with the hand exercise that it wasn't the common way of looking at the hand, and I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it was like the hand was separate from the me. And as I look out the window and I look at a tree, for example, I I see the tree for what it is, but there's a separation. Not a, it's not I am the tree, but there's the tree and there's me. Um,
Can you
and
separate? Can you, just a quick question, and I want to hear the rest of what you want to say, but can you separate what's aware of your hand and what's aware of the tree from the hand or the tree?
I can sense it. I don't know if I can go beyond sensing it.
Okay, that's enough.
And
Sensing is enough.
then I notice I start thinking about the tree.
Yeah, well, that's what we're talking about this day. Yeah, how we're, and we're all conditioned to do that. It's not wrong. It's just that there's a deeper way of seeing. And when you say it's separate, I want to just pose the possibility that what you're seeing is what distinguishes something, and you're equating it with being separate. Like your hand really is not separate from your body,
Right.
but you had the sense of seeing it as its own isness, we might say. Its distinctive flavor, its distinctive form and function. So that's what, the whole of life really seems to be, from my perspective anyway, is this, the expressions of the infinite, the functioning, the color, the shape, the sound, the texture, the sound, all of those things are distinctive, individual, distinctive expressions of the same essence.
I understand that intellectually, and I also understand it on another level, which I can't describe. But I guess my curiosity is that feeling of separateness. It's like there's that and there's this, and there's a real separate sense of separateness, of almost like space is me, and then there's something over there, and it's not separate. Well, I don't know how else to.
I mean, it's hard to speak about it, but the experience of being separate is the identification with the me. I mean, that is what what we might call ego, is that which seems to look at the world from a place of being separate from it. And it comes and goes, it's not like, okay, this is some solid something. If you try to find an ego, you will not find anything.
Right.
Really, it's really empty. However, there's a way of thinking, right? And that thinking, or the belief, the idea of a separate I, when I look out at all of you, we share that I. We share the I that's awake and aware, the I am, without those words,
Right.
just the sense of being, the sense of existing, the sense of when we have moments that we're quiet enough to receive the deeper knowledge, not the intellectual knowledge, then there's a sense of oneness. Is that the experience at every moment? No, because this divides itself in two: to see itself, to experience itself, to love itself. I mean, that seems to me to be about the best reason I can think of why we have life in the dual world. It's where our mind functions. It functions in time and space. It functions in duality. So when we ask the mind to try to function from what's called the non-duality, that's not its capacity. It can't do that. It may be trying really hard. It may have an idea, but to actually experience the non-separation is to drop beyond the mind of thought. And that's what we're kind of pointing to, the don't know mind, that has a doorway to that dimension that's never separate.
It's funny because I feel like that sense of separateness is much broader and much more encompassing than just a sense of self. And yet it's like when I'm sensing that state, that's different from my normal state. Mm-hmm. And it's different from, that's the separation that I see, that I just feel separate. the world in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the other thing to sort of appreciate, which I'm appreciating in this moment, is that we all perceive differently.
Oh.
Do you know? The
Yeah.
perception, I mean, I've often said, I don't know why this seems so fascinating to me, but you know, if I could see through the eyes of a cow whose eyes are on the side of the head, or through a bumblebee that has just all these facets, it would be a very different world of perception, wouldn't it?
Right.
Do you know? However, in your own experience, Len, isn't there something that actually is aware of perceiving?
I don't know.
Well, you're speaking about it from my perspective.
Yeah.
You're speaking about the knowing that this is how I perceive. I perceive even the large space as something separate from the me space, which
Right.
it does feel different. There's no question about it. But a deeper question is it really separate? You know? And that's where, you know, the inquiry, the needing to know on that deep level of who or what we are comes in. You know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But the
Thank you.
perception itself, I mean, there's an awareness because you're speaking to us about it of
Yeah.
how this perceiving happens. And we all perceive a different world. You know, we can agree that a flower, maybe we'll all say it's a flower, but even that we're perceiving differently, because some flowers you will love and some flowers you will not like. You know, you'll want to get rid of certain things in your yard, or the dandelion that's peeking out from the side of the sidewalk, from the crack in the sidewalk. Some people will see as beautiful and other people will see as a weed. Do you know? The thing that's tossed on the street, do you know, could be seen as a piece of trash, or it could be seen as an expression of the one looking just like that. Do you know? So, and of course there's every conceivable thing in between. And we'll maybe talk more about this afternoon, because, or this evening if you're in a different time zone, what this don't know mind can do in relationship, because we think that we're all perceiving the same thing, and clearly we're not seeing it the same way, you know. And that's part of what we can honor and respect, you know, that this that's aware, that's awake, may be the same, but its viewing points, you know, whether they're cow or bumblebee or Len, you know, the viewing points are the viewing points of the mystery, but what it is viewing from, in the sense of perceiving, quite individual.
I think maybe the issue for me is I don't see that other realm in a sense as awareness. It's
Well,
just
I mean, that word itself can limit our experience, so
uh,
it's fine not to see it as awareness. You know, I mean, some would see it as, you know, use the word Buddha nature, God, Christ consciousness, the mystery, heart of awareness. None of those words are it. So far better to experience sense into it,
yeah.
than to agree on a word, because that, no matter what the word is, just like we were finding out with the hand, you know, the word hand tells us very little
That's true.
about the mystery of the hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Lynn. Maybe one more. Yeah, Mary, before we go on. Mary. You have to unmute yourself, dear heart. There you go.
Thank you. This is a very exciting and very interesting conversation. As the session started, I was very calm and assured, and then I got this message across the screen right here. It says 4:30 conference call with the legal. So, and I know what it's about. It's a legal contract that's just now going to be discussed. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to be able to sit here and be very calm and everything. But now I realize this is the way life plays with me. And when you said the listening, I thought, there's the gift right there. The listening. And then to really respect what arises there in a deep listening, like the not knowing mind, and how is it going to function in a legal conversation? The people who want to, they want something, and for example, one of the things that's going to be discussed is, what's the title that you're going to have in this production? And I just thought, there's something else leading this caravan, much greater than I am. It's like, what is that's leading it? It's the unknown mind, the not knowing mind. So,
go ahead.
So I go into this conversation with, I have to say, of course, there's some, there is some anxiety in the mind that's going on, and I won't deny that. But on the other hand, there's this other beautiful, deep listening too. And there is an open heart here that wants to open and connect with the not knowing mind. But not knowing mind doesn't have to be stupid in a legal conversation.
No, and we're not, as I emphasized on Sunday, not knowing mind doesn't mean there isn't also knowing. And I do want to speak about in a little while what not knowing mind is not. Because sometimes there's a knowing of something we don't want to know. And then we'll, I just don't know. I don't know, but you really know.
Yeah.
And then there are other times, like this afternoon, like you got this message. There was an anxiety. You don't know what's going to happen in this meeting, in this conference call, and the mind is not very comfortable often with not knowing. It doesn't really like not knowing, it feels anxious about it. But then there was a knowing of the anxious mind, wasn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. And that which knows experience is not the intellect. It's not a thought. Thinking doesn't see. But something sees, something was awake and aware, not noticing, anxiety, what we call anxiety here, and anxiety in this case is about whatever it is, but it's a lot about not knowing and being expected to know what's the title.
Yeah.
And see, this is where dropping from don't know mind into that space of unknowing allows often something to rise from that dimension, right? It's not because I've made a list, and sometimes we would make a list, of different possible titles to whatever we're producing or writing or whatever. But sometimes even if that's the case, there'll be just something that will come, and there'll be a yes. And maybe not, but that's the openness. I don't know how it'll go, but something is available for this. Something that you are is already open for this. And it's open for all of it, including the anxious feelings.
And I think there's a sense of trusting that
Correct.
this will definitely show up at the door. It's not going to go away when that.
Yes, 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 yes. Is there anything else you want to say about it at the moment?
Well, I'm just thinking how amazing it is that it happened right in the middle of this. Oh, where else could it be? Just, it comes right at the time when it's supposed to be there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of amazing how life will show us, and what it shows us when. But I have a little story for you, Mary, and it's a story for any of us. It comes from Stephen Mitchell's second book of the Tao.
Yeah. I have
And
it
do you have it?
right here on the shelf.
Okay. Well, you may have read this little story. These are all from Chuangzi or other Taoist teachers that have been rendered into present-day English. But this one is a conversation between a student and a teacher, and the student's name is Penumbra, and the teacher's name is Shadow. Penumbra said to Shadow, "When the Tao moves, you move. When it stops, you stop. Don't you find it depressing to have no power of your own?" Shadow said, "On the contrary, with no decisions to make, my mind is always at ease. All I have to do is follow. You can't imagine how much freedom there is in just going along for the ride." Penumbra said, "But how can you know that its decisions are right? Where do you find your trust?" That's why I thought of this story when you mentioned that. Where do you find your trust? Shadow said, "Whether I trust it or not, whether or not its decisions are right, when it moves, I move. So I might as well trust it." And see, Penumbra had equated, as often our minds will do, it equated the loss of control with the loss of power.
Yeah.
There's tremendous power in this that is the intelligence of the universe, tremendous power. But we feel that power to the extent that we're willing to let go of control.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can be at the disposal of this universal intelligence, and we can be at its disposal for big things, obviously, but also for little things as well. Just like this afternoon, there's a space that maybe is just curious. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this conversation goes, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not attached, that which is open in that way, it's not attached to the outcome. Now, there may be, a part of the mind that's quite attached to an outcome, but that gets to be seen as well,
Yes.
So just knowing that, like you were saying, Mary, on some level, there is a trust in how life actually moves.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is
exactly.
a knowing that can be trusted.
Exactly. And so often that knowing doesn't come until the moment we need to know.
That's it. Yeah.
So right now, whatever time it is where you are in Maine, right?
Yeah, in Maine.
Okay, wherever you are, whatever time it is, this is where you are. And at 4:30, you'll be in that conference call. And the same thing that's here now is here then.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Doesn't go away just because
No.
I changed the scenery here.
Exactly. It doesn't come and go.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's so comforting,
Yeah.
actually, if we deeply know that. It doesn't come and go. Not when the mind is anxious, not when the mind is confused, not when the mind seems perfectly at peace, not when the feelings are turbulent, not when the feelings are all calm. It doesn't go away. It's here for the whole show because it's show.
Right.
It's not a separate one. And yet there are these unbelievable variety of expressions. Yeah.
Yes.
So
I think
good luck this afternoon.
I think the little message that went across was one of the expressions.
Exactly. I mean, these computers we're looking at, that's an expression, isn't it? You know, and it can, it can deliver like a lot of spam messages or junk messages or messages from beloved friends,
Mhm.
In itself, it's not good or bad. Yeah. Another Ramana quote that comes to mind in terms of that story that I read about penumbra and shadow, and how, penumbra thought not feeling like you were in control was meaning that there was no power. And of course, that's not the case. But the quote from Ramana Maharshi that comes to mind in this case, he said, the ego is like a shadow on the ground. If you try to bury it, it will seem foolish. It's just a shadow. What we think of as something separate is just a shadow of the infinite. Do you know?
Mhm.
Ramana also said, there's only the self. There is only the self. When unlimited, it's the infinite. When limited, it's ego. So you see, there's this continuum. Or one of you were saying, this, I think it was you, Lynn, this feels like ordinary mind. Was it you? Yeah. And there's a quote, some ancient Buddhist teacher whose name I have long since forgotten, but the quote was, Buddha mind is ordinary mind. Ordinary mind is Buddha mind. So thought is making the distinctions. Oh, if I experience this, it can't be this because this feels, like limited and small. But what is the source? What is the source of power of this that's conscious in each one of us?
Mm.
Do you know? And is that separate? Is that a separate consciousness? Is that a separate from the awareness? Is that, is your electric stove separate from the electricity that's giving it its power? We could say, well, yes and no. Right? Because we could remove the stove and electricity would still be available. And that is true of these vehicles we call our body mind. It could be here, it could not be here, and yet that's beyond that, and yet not separate from it. It doesn't come and go, regardless of how forms transform themselves. Yeah. Anything else before I read you another little story? Yeah, Lee.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hi.
When we were doing the exercise where you asked us to, I'll just say, rest back in the heart, it seemed like there was resting there. And then because I have a cold, I became aware of head congestion and soreness in the throat, and just a feeling of, I don't like this, a feeling of resistance came up.
Sure.
And there was an annoyance at that physical sensation. And then I realized something is aware of that resistance. And that was sort of an invitation to just fall back into myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Recognizing the resistance or recognizing the I don't like this thought.
Sure. And I mean, let's be honest, if we're sick, it isn't supposed to feel good because something wants attention, And yet your experience of it can shift by noticing exactly what you noticed. Something is aware of not liking it, of wishing I weren't sick, of, my throat hurting, my head being congested. Something is awake to that experience. And so when we have pain, something's wanting attention. It isn't supposed to feel great if it's begging for attention, right? In the sense of bodily pain and so forth. But yeah, that's the difference between seeing something clearly from that deeper place and being identified with it.
But it seemed ironic because on the one hand, I felt like this unpleasant physical sensation was pulling me away from resting
Yes.
awareness, yet at the same time, it was an invitation or a reminder to fall back into.
Perfect. Yeah. Anything. I don't care how how pleasant or unpleasant it might be. And I'm not saying this isn't challenging for the mind, but anything can be a portal to our true nature, because there's nothing separate. So if you take any experience far enough, deep enough, you can't help but bump into true nature, by whatever name we're going to call it. And so anything can be that invitation, just like your cold was an invitation in some respects right now. Yeah.
I'd still be happier without it.
Well, I still would wish you not, to have a very speedy recovery, because there's compassion for anyone who's in discomfort. I'm kind of surprised that, that even somebody has a cold, because so many folks I know who've been wearing masks and all that for a year. They haven't gotten the coronavirus. Of course, some have. They haven't gotten the regular flu. Some have, I suppose, and they haven't gotten the common cold. So you get to stand out.
It's probably because I just commented to someone last week, I haven't even had a cold. Clearly that was the cause.
You never know, do you? You never know. Yeah. And that's a great tip. Not that there's a cause and effect. I don't know that that's the case. But on the other hand, I would also caution any of us to beware of those moments where we feel there's been some degree of opening or awakening experience. And then there's the feeling like, well, I will never go back again. This is so clear. I'll always be here for the rest of my life. There's somebody claiming what isn't his or hers to claim, because it doesn't come from any separate mind idea. And so life will show us where we maintain separation, not as a punishment, but in a sense as a expression of love, I think, to show us, and sometimes it's a daily thing. We'll see how many times and in what subtle and maybe not so subtle ways we're divided from each other, divided from ourselves, divided from the moment as it is. And not because we're not awake, but because this human thing is playing itself out, as an expression of this that's beyond any identification with human. Anything else pressing the moment? Yeah, Victoria.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hi there.
Hi. I'd like to just share my reflection when you asked to look at the hand, and it's so lovely that, and I just noticed how the shape my fingers were just naturally resting, and then I started to think like just all these beautiful creations that we do with our hands, that we can bake, and all these artists, or they pick up a pen and write. And my thoughts got a bit carried away. Just of the beauty of what we can do with hands. But what I found interested, when my thoughts were being carried away, I was aware with the thoughts, and there was a settling with the thoughts. That even though my mind was and just thinking of beautiful things, I was totally aware with them.
Yes.
But I guess it's like, well, I wasn't clinging or wanting anything from, and I really felt quite quiet with my busy thoughts.
Exactly. That's the freedom. And sometimes it's a very unexpected freedom that we have when we're in touch with our true nature, is that, we always thought it would be when there's no busy mind, or never again a moment of anxiety or fear. But in fact, it's as you describe it. There's something that's here, present, totally not judging, but not attached. And that's
because sometimes you want to get rid of the thoughts, sometimes, oh, busy thought. But it was just interesting to experience like this, just the flow of flow of thoughts. Like there's no space with them, but there was settling. It was quite. I found that really interesting. Like that. Yeah, you can have quite a busy mind, and there's also a stillness.
Exactly. Well, this is a little exercise that I've done, and some of you who've been around me have done this before, but many of you haven't. So I want to just invite it right now, since you're talking about this theme. And that is, just for a moment, let's just be a little exercise. So just for a moment, close your eyes and let yourself go to your home ground, wherever that feels like it is in yourself. I can't tell you how to get there, but you know when you have landed your attention in your home ground. And it may or may not have a distinct location, or it possibly does in your own body, mind. And just for these moments, get familiar with that felt sense of your home ground. And once you have a taste of that, or a little bit of a sense of it, let yourself have a thought. Any thought will do. Or you could have lots of thoughts. It doesn't matter. And feel the energy in your body as you're beginning to think. See if you can feel a movement of energy. Not everyone will be able to, but some of you may be able to. Feel how energy goes up to the head, how you can even feel your body perhaps, or your shoulders going up, or however it is for you when you get into the thinking mind. And most people spend most of their days up here in the thinking mind. But now let yourself return attention to your home ground. And now I just want to invite you to remain at home and have a thought simultaneously. Attention stays in the home ground where it's quiet, silent, open, present. And a thought is able to occur. And so you can just play with this for a few moments, you know. What is it like to stay home, attention-wise? And also be thinking. And I would gather that some of you, like Victoria was speaking about, will have this sense of it's possible to think while also being settled. It's possible to notice when the mind is having thoughts or even very busy with thoughts, and something continues to be quiet, at peace, present, at home. Okay, you can play with that on your own later if you like. But did any of you have that sense of the difference between going up to identified mind and staying in your home ground while still thinking? Yeah, a few of you, great. So anything else, Victoria? I mean, I just sort of stuck that in the middle of our conversation. But it felt,
no, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it felt appropriate to do that. And maybe I'll just read another little story from the second book of Tao that kind of touches on a little bit of this. And this is from Chuang-Tzu. The great Tao cannot be named. Great discernment cannot be seen. Great benevolence is not gentle. Great modesty is not meek. Great courage is not aggressive. When you truly understand the Tao that cannot be named, you become rooted in not knowing. This is called inner radiance. Add to it, it's never full. Take from it, it is never depleted. Who can tell where it comes from? It is the inexhaustible treasury. And Mitchell's commentary includes these words: the Tao that cannot be named is the intelligence of the universe, whatever is happening right now. The mind that realizes this is the don't know mind, which is open to all possibilities because it doesn't believe its own thoughts. What more is there to say? Except that there's a radiance about people who have settled into the depths of unknowing. You can see it in their eyes. It doesn't depend on what happens or doesn't happen. They have found the inexhaustible treasure in the most obvious place of all. In the most obvious place of all, right inside you, not out there somewhere. But before we end our morning session, as it were, I want to speak a little bit about what don't know mind is not, because in this exploration, we're not talking about don't know mind as some fixed position. You know, a fixed position of don't know would be like the fixed position of I know. Do you know, either one is limiting this flow, this movement between don't know mind and knowing. Do you know? And it's like where knowing is coming from is the point. Don't know mind is also not about hanging out in the absolute in order to avoid here and now, in order to avoid engaging in the world. I mean, if you have had a sense of the absolute, the infinite, the mystery, whatever, it can become easy to kind of hang out, as in Buddhist we would say, hanging out in emptiness. But there's a danger there, because we're using it as an escape from being here, being available to what's in front of us in this relative life, this relative world, escaping from maybe a compassionate heart, that if we were really allowing suffering to come in consciously, whether it was our own or that of the world, there would be compassionate awareness and compassionate activity that might flow quite naturally before we try to become compassionate. So it's not a cop-out for not taking responsibility. Oh, I don't know, I just don't know, I just don't know. As a way of not making a decision when perhaps a decision is required, Like for Mary, there may be a decision that's required this afternoon. I don't know, But don't know mind is not about avoiding decisions, where it's not about refusing to make a decision. And it's also it's not a refusal of taking a stand when taking a stand is what's needed. We can retreat with don't know mind, or we can just go deeper with don't know mind. And, people speak about spiritual bypassing, and there's plenty of that in the spiritual community, but spirit doesn't bypass anything. What's awake and aware doesn't bypass anything. It's the mind that uses concepts to avoid, in a sense, avoid knowing what we might not want to know, or what we might hope to be rid of, But really, even those things that we hope to be rid of, if we come at it with don't know mind, then we become curious. What is this? What is this feeling? What is this contraction? Not how am I going to analyze it and manipulate it and control it and get rid of it and somehow push it into the hinterlands, but really curiosity. What is this? Yeah, whatever just happened just made this incredible contraction in my gut. Can I be with that experience with curiosity instead of trying to shove it back out the door? Can I open the door to not knowing, which is a curious stance, we might say. So it's not self-centered either. Don't know mind is not self-centered. It's actually aligning ourselves when it's used, we might say, more advantageously from that which is living its life through us. When it's used to connect to our oneness, to our non-separation, which is not self-centered, because being itself, life itself, it doesn't seem to move in service to some idea of a separate somebody. Have you noticed? It doesn't seem to do that. It moves in service to the whole. And that being in service to the whole also means that causes and conditions simply happen, And at least the way I see it, those causes and conditions, they go back to beginningless time. They're not just about even, this moment or this lifetime or these parents I had or the grandparents or whatever. I mean, there's a whole movement. I mean, we see, if you follow the news, this incredible conflict and war that's been going on between Israel and Palestinians. That goes back generations and generations and generations. And then you see it just replaying itself, war, anger, not feeling safe, needing to hold on to territory in order to feel safe. I mean, all of those things just, they go back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and then we see it playing out. I mean, it's the same with abuse of any kind. we often see that those people who are the so-called abusers have been abused. And there's a way of trying to take power, trying to be in control of a situation. But if we're allowed to know what we know, let's take this sense of abuse. If we're allowing ourselves to know what we know, and we know the pain, and we know the fear, there will naturally arise compassion. And that compassion, eventually, maybe not all at once, it will move to being sure that we're not responsible for behaving in the same way so that someone else has to feel what we felt that's so painful. But if we're just putting blinders on and saying, no, 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 nothing's here, it's okay, it's all okay, do you know, then we don't have that opportunity, do you know? And on some level it is all okay, but when we're talking about compassion, it's the felt sense of the suffering that brings compassion naturally. It's not something that today I'm going to be compassionate. Yesterday I wasn't, but today I'm going to be compassionate. It's not something we put onto the moment, although a lot of minds think so. It arises right up from the depths of the unknown mystery that feels to me as though it is compassionate awareness. It is compassionate and loving. You know, it is intimate. It is at one. So it's at one with suffering. It's at one with joy. It's at one with laughter. It's at one with crying and grief and sadness. It's at one with anger. It's at one with calmness. In itself, it's simply reflecting what is intimately at one. So we recognize bias or injustice or racism or all of those things, but if we're recognizing it and willing not to know in the moment what that moment needs, then we're open for what it actually might be inviting to come forth in terms of action or words or no action. You know, it's not something we overlay. It's the place where we're living from. And that's where it's possible, as Victoria was telling us, it's possible to be settled and quiet and at peace, even when a lot is happening, you know, on the level of mind. So don't know mind is actually good medicine when we're feeling overwhelmed or stressed or anxious about something, you know, to remind ourselves that we don't really know. And sometimes the thing that we thought was horrible, you know, we look back on later and think that's the best thing that ever happened. You know, maybe, you know, there were romantic partners along the line that we were just so incredibly unhappy that didn't last for long. But then later you look back and you think, oh, thank God, you know, because something, you know, something that we didn't know then was playing itself out in a way that was actually for our own good, in some kind of wise or intelligent way. So, you know, it's just not a fixed, don't know mind is not a fixed position, you know, but it's incredibly useful to be open regardless, you know, and the way to be open is to keep noticing that something in you, not apart from you, is already open. It's already open. It's already present. It's already at peace. It's already quite settled in its own mysterious way, you know, regardless. And so the more we are not dividing ourselves because we have this idea of a separate self, the more we're not dividing ourselves from that deep dimension of ourself, the more we will be able to speak and act from that place. And sometimes the speaking or the acting will be surprising. You know, and it takes a little getting used to, for sure, to begin to trust not knowing. I know after Adyashanti invited me to teach many, many years ago, before that, I used to lead meditation groups, and you know, and I had my little 3x5 cards, and I'd be very prepared, and there'd be a way, you know, and then something changed, and life, the mind, the mystery didn't let me do that anymore. And so it was just like, okay, stepping into the unknown, what's going to be spoken today? You know, it's not that there's never an idea. I mean, clearly I brought a few stories to share if they seemed appropriate, or a few poems. I have, you know, those things available, but there's no sense of how it's going to go, because we're creating it together here today. You know, just like life itself, you know, we are the divine, and we're also co-creators of the divine mysteries expression, you know, in life in general, our lives. Because absolute and relative aren't two. Samsara and nirvana are not two. Our experience may seem to make it two, because we've identified with one side, instead of seeing that it's all coming from the same source, all coming from the same essence. And that essence, if we really encounter that really, really deeply, as St. John of the Cross was writing about, we will remain in unknowing about that. We can't give it an intellectual description. We can't know it as an object, but we can be it. And you've heard other people say that. And I'm like, oh, well, that's all well and good, but what is that? I mean, that's the question, you know, what is that? And to really let yourself, you know, attend to, we might say, deeper and deeper dimensions of yourself, or wider and wider dimensions of yourself, or higher and higher dimensions of yourself. I mean, it's not about lower, higher, left, right. It's really about truth, you know? It's about stepping into what the mind cannot know, and yet it shows itself. It reveals itself. It knows itself. And it seems to love itself in all of its sometimes beautiful and sometimes quite crazy looking expressions. So maybe I will just end this morning's thing with one other thing, if I can find what I brought. Maybe not. Well, this is kind of fun. So let me just end it with this. As I mentioned the other day, Sun Sang, who's a Korean Zen master, often says, I don't teach Buddhism, I only teach don't know. And he has a book of poetry, or maybe more than one, but I have one of his books of poetry. And this is a poem called Zen Master Don't Know. And you have to realize, you know, his use of the English language doesn't necessarily have a lot of pronouns to it. But that's also an effect, you know, of pointing. So anyway, this says, Zen Master Don't Know. Zen Master, what is don't know? Don't know. I don't understand, don't know. Well, what are you? I don't know. Don't make I thin. Understand, don't know. Still don't understand, don't know. Don't know is don't know. Do you understand, don't know? Don't know. Do you understand, don't know? Don't know. That's correct. Do you understand, don't know? Don't know. Go straight, okay? And this is my favorite part of this poem. Zen master also don't know. Buddha also don't know. God also don't know. Confucius also don't know. Only go straight don't know. You don't know. I don't know. All don't know. So only go straight don't know, okay? And then the student asks, how? And as this particular Zen master's training was, he goes, whack, hits the guy. He says, ouch. And then he says, are you thirsty? Go drink cold water. So it may just feel like it's a silly Zen speak poem, but it actually invites us to that place where we don't know intellectually, where we'll never know intellectually, and yet it's always functioning. This intelligence of the universe, it knows when you're thirsty. And then get to have a drink of water. It knows when you're tired. So maybe you get to go to bed, take a nap. The here and now is where it operates. It doesn't operate as a thought. It operates as a here and now. Here and now, you that are already awake. So as we break for lunch or dinner or whatever meal you might be having, see if you can bring the same attention that you brought to your hand to something in these next couple of hours where we're going to have a break. See if you can bring it to the food that you're eating or a drink that you're drinking, or if you take a walk. I like to have a long break in a retreat day. If we were at a retreat center, we would be able to go out, into beautiful nature, redwood trees, whatever, wherever you are. But maybe you can spend a little time also, if you're moved to, during this break of being out in nature. Whereas I was mentioning the other day, it's so much easier to have a sense of being at one, in part because the trees, the earth, the flowers, the grass, it's not expecting anything of us. There are no obligations. I mean, clearly if there's a tornado, it's creating some reason for action. But in general, if we're just taking a walk in the woods or in a park or just sitting in our backyard, if we have a backyard where we live, there's so much to see from this deeper way of seeing. There's so much to experience from a mind that isn't already stuck and limiting experience because we think we know. We think we know. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about thinking we know in terms of relationship, where we have a lot of challenges, most of us, in some ways or another, because we do think we know when possibly we don't. So anyway, I would just say thank you for your attention, your presence here with me